তাই আহি গৈছে নাই দে 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 মই এতিয়া তাই তাতেহে আছে মোৰ ইনট্ৰডাকশ্যনটো 2 মিনিট আছে তই প্লিজ ইউটিউবত চাচোন ইউটিউবত চা ইউটিউবত চা কি আছে ইউটিউবত অঁ নে মোৰ মেইল আই ডি আহি আছে মেইলটো আহি আছে নেকি অ'কে এতিয়া চাচোন কি চলি আছে তই এটা একচেপ্ট কৰি দেচোন তই এটা একচেপ্ট কৰি দে
Very good afternoon to all the participants. This is our fourth lecture session of the National Webinar on Women Issues and Challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, Prospective Measures. Our lecture session 4 will have Debdatta Das as a resource person.
Dr. Debdatta
Das, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of
her.
her. She is a BA LLB from University of Kolkata with first class, and she have pursued LLM from National Law Institute, University of Bhopal, and have secured second position in the merit list. Her area of specialization is victimology and have special interest in subjects like criminology, IPC, juvenile justice, gender justice, etc. After having served various educational institutions in different parts of the country, she have joined the Department of Law, the University of Burdwan in 2016. She have a large number of publication in books, journals and magazines to her credit and on platforms of EPG Patsala. She is currently the teacher in charge of Department of Law, University of Burdwan, West Bengal. So now I'd like to request Dr. Debdatta ma'am to start with the session. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, please you unmute
Ma'am,
yourself.
please you unmute yourself. Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah. Thank you, Pallavi, for that introduction. This is not a very ideal time to listen to lectures. We all know that right at the afternoon. But nevertheless, we all are going through a phase where we are doing a number of things which we are not very much used to or we had never anticipated. God has suddenly brought us in a situation which we had never imagined, even in the wildest or the worst of our thoughts. Anyways, to start with this, today I'm about to discuss with you all, or rather share some of my views or experiences or what I have gathered by listening to people or reading or knowing from Facebook or other online resources, the current situation that is going around. We are dealing with a topic that deals with challenges faced by women during COVID pandemic. Whenever there are challenges, whenever there are hardships, women is always one of the groups which or who has to face it. That's why probably in Bengali we call a woman as a Doshabhuja, a representative of Ma Durga, because she can do it. She has that power. She has that energy. And it said God tests those who can. It doesn't test those who can't. Anyways, to start with, challenges faced by women during the COVID pandemic. The sudden pandemic caused by coronavirus has brought the life of all people around the globe nearly to a standstill. It is such an enemy for whom we do not have a weapon to attack. We are ready for China, but we do not know what we should be doing for corona. To be true, we do not even have any defense mechanism to ensure our safety and security. All that we all have at this moment is hope and complete reliance on prevention and protection. But this enemy is immensely potential to transform a busy and active world into a graveyard and make all of us believe that time has suddenly come to a halt. The sudden attack of this virus has completely changed the nature, scope, and speed of all our lives. It has completely dismantled the life that we all were leading. It does not recognize first world and third world, the social distinctions of have and have not. It's completely unknown to it. It is oblivious to the norms of a patriarchal society. The virus is the flag bearer of destruction and cause of complete dismantling of society at micro as well as macro level, at social and economic level. Certain sections of the society are always regarded as the vulnerable groups, and these groups are most prone to victimization of any kind at any time. Lack of power in terms of economic resources, physical strength, social taboos and acceptance, social norms, etc., all these factors make these groups most vulnerable. Elderly people, backward community, children, women are such kind of vulnerable section. India being highly populated and having a very high density of population, the potential risk of that India was about to face due to COVID was always extremely high. In such situation, India, like most of the other countries, had no other option but to go for a lockdown. And it was imposed in India in mostly 3 phases, and we are presently going through the phases of unlocking. The lockdown was, in the course of time, people were affected during the lockdown due to various reasons at macro and micro level. Now, with the government attempting to flatten the corona curve, What actually led to was a rise of many other curves. These curves related to loss of job, financial insecurity, domestic violence, matrimonial disputes, etc. These are just to name a few. Men and women together form a society. But the patriarchal nature of the society seldom genuinely treats a woman as the equal partner and appears to be more habitual and used to in considering a woman as the weaker sex, as this probably makes the society feel more comfortable in executing the unequal and demeaning treatment towards her. In a recent article in EPW, we all know about Flavia Agnes. She stated, she said, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act was enacted in 2005. But even after a decade and a half, the assurances made in the Act have not been actualized when we examine the cases which are filed under this Act. Citing individual cases from her experience working with women's rights organization, Agnes argued that though the Act itself expanded the definition of domestic violence to include not just physical but also verbal, emotional, sexual, and economic violence, and provided the scope for urgent protective injunctions along with economic rights, including maintenance and compensation, its fruitful implementation was impeded by cultural factors that informally guide the functioning of the police and judiciary, as this case demonstrates. During the COVID pandemic, if any section of the society, irrespective of the economic status, has suffered immensely, then of course, that is women, we women. We have a lot of women audiences here, and we all will be accepting this fact somewhere or the other. Women in today's changing dimensions of the society not only is restricted to the four walls, but today she is also the bread earner, the corporate executive, the mother, the entrepreneur. Rather, we can say she is one frame with various manifestations. In Bengali, we say, Ek yonge bohuru. Due to the current crisis that the world is facing, various incidents and statistics show that women have suffered not only economically, but at the same time, physically, emotionally, sexually, and socially. Now, as I move ahead with this lecture, I will be highlighting first the challenges which are mainly faced by women during this period of COVID. To start with, abuse. Abuse has been on both the fronts. That is, abuse has been personal and also to an extent professional. Personal abuse includes their vulnerability to their kith and kin for being abused and exploited physically, emotionally, sexually, and also economically. Professional abuse includes insecurity of employment, economic instability, acute work pressure along with household obligation during the period of work from home, apart from psychological stress and potential sexual abuse. In words of Marianne Hester, a very famous sociologist, she said, domestic violence goes up whenever families spend more time together, such as Christmas and summer vacation. Now, if we take this as the hypothesis, then it is again proved this time during the period of COVID. Though it is not a very happy time when we are staying together, but nevertheless, the families are staying together under conditions of compulsion, though not choice. Domestic violence and partner abuse has witnessed a remarkable escalation during the pandemic globally. General Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary, on 6th April 2020 called for a ceasefire to address the horrifying global surge in domestic violence. Rise of intimate partner violence cases are found around the globe associated with lockdown policies from United States to UK to France, China, and India is no exception. In the opinion of Aparna Joshi, she's a project director with ICOL, mental health helpline. The present situation is the brewing point. Frustrated, unemployed, struggling to access tobacco and alcohol, several men are just unloading their anger through physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. The surge of violence is affecting millions of women all across the globe. Because by nature, men are very used to seeing the or being frequenting the outside world more than women. And as a frustration of being confined within the household, as Aparna Joshi says or describes, this is a natural outcome that is being exhibited in the form of various kinds of abuses on women who are there in the homes or houses. Since the announcement of lockdown, the number of complaints related to domestic violence received by National Commission of Women has doubled. According to reports of Al Jazeera, National Commission for Women in India registered 587 cases between March 23rd and 16th of April, up from 396 cases between February 27th and March 22nd. Other agencies too are seeing a rise in these figures of domestic violence. The child line has again received twice the number of calls as it used to receive on an average. Though we have not witnessed any as such concrete policy, but nevertheless, India's Women and Child Development Minister Smriti Irani has reiterated again and again to ensure that women helplines are functioning more effectively and without any disruption. The National Commission of Women has launched a WhatsApp number, making it easier for women to ask for it. If you log on to the NCW website, you will see one of the first screens that it's showing is the WhatsApp number, the number being 72177353372. This is the emergency WhatsApp number that is being flashed on the NCW website for purpose of reporting of such cases of domestic violence to NCW. The chairperson of NCW claimed that Asha and Anganwadi and other frontline health workers are counseling against domestic violence, and women can report to these workers in case they are facing abuse. The Delhi High Court, in response to a petition filed by an NGO, directed the government to deliberate on the measures to ensure effective implementation of Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act 2005 due to the rise in these numbers of cases. The state in its reply said it has put up a protocol in place where a survivor once calls the helpline, the telecaller will immediately take the complaint and forward it to the counselor, who will establish a phone communication with the survivor during the lockdown. The court disposed of the petition with the status report filed by the government. Jammu and Kashmir court came up with a very nice response. On one hand, it asked for, along with other directions, it asked for creation of a special fund, and on the other hand, it stated, or it said about designating some informal spaces. Now, informal spaces like grocery shops, pharmacy shops, where these women could go and report about these abuses. Because for them, getting an access to the proper authority was a challenge during this time. Now, these were the shops where women were, due to their daily needs, they were visiting in course of their life. So it was easy for them to access these places and report. They became the contact points. The Karnataka High Court too asked the state government about the helpline and the action taken on domestic violence, and the state replied that these helplines were active, the counselors were working, the protection officers were working round the clock. In UP, they have started with a particular program which is named as Suppress Corona, Not Your Voice, to encourage women to come out in case of such abuses which are happening. Basically because it's a very stigmatized thing that people generally avoid, because it is about a family. And moreover, right now, because of the conditions in which they are, it is more difficult for them to venture out. A 28-year-old homemaker of West Bengal stated, as has been reported in media, "My husband could not go to his office during the lockdown and was required to do a few household chores. Following this, he vented out all his frustration on me. The longer he stayed at home, the more he started beating me up." The woman lodged a complaint with Swayam. Swayam is a very active and very far-stretched NGO which works for such causes of women. Authorities of Swayam stated Normally, we handle nearly 1,000 to 1,200 cases every year, but since March 20th, we started receiving more domestic violence complaints over the phone. Earlier, we used to have 3 helpline numbers and 1 email ID. With more and more complaints pouring in, now we have 9 helpline numbers. In the last 2 months, we have received nearly 1,100 complaints. So earlier it was a yearly number, which was 1,000 to 1,200, but now they have received 1,100 complaints during this period of lockdown of the last 2 months. Couple of more very interesting and pertinent observations were made by Swayam. One was, men are usually not taught to do household chores, but as they are compelled to take such domestic activities, is one of the reasons, as observed by Swayam, for the rise of such domestic violence. They had to spend 24 hours within their house with their family members under the same roof, as they could not step out. They channeled their frustration on women, be it their daughter, their wife, their mother, in way physical, emotional, or sexual violence. So it is important to note that such violences which are being reported are strictly not against wife. It is any female member of the family which is subject to being, or who are subject to such kind of abuse, violence, torture, whatever you name it. Another very important observation was, such kind of complaints are not only coming from the lower strata of the society. Educated, financially independent women of the upper strata having a professional life are also the ones who are making such complaints. And a very similar observation was made not only by Swayam but also by another NGO, as has been reported, that which is named as SAFO for Equality. The West Bengal Commission for Women has reported an increase in domestic violence also during the period of lockdown. It received 162 cases of crimes against women, including a large number of this being domestic violence. Leena Gangopadhyay, the present chairman of West Bengal Commission for Women, told the Indian Express, the commission has been receiving applications and has been taking immediate action on this basis through applications received via helpline numbers, WhatsApp numbers, emails, etc. Other than this, there are quite a number of NGOs which are very active in this field and are circulating the helpline numbers to the people, those who are in need of such access. Now, another dimension of this abuse has been the online abuse. Now, as people are confined within their homes and largely dependent on the internet as the basic source of communication or everyday, whether it be child education, whether it be your grocery, whether it be anything, we are mostly dependent on this internet for our regular needs as well as for entertainment, as well as for our whatever, be it consulting a doctor, anything. So the more we are interacting with the internet, the more we are becoming vulnerable to the internet. The various online abusers are finding new methods to catch their prey. And at the same time, lack of proper awareness, lack of knowledge about online privacy, online security are making women more and more vulnerable. There are lots of these relationships which are building on, and following which there are lots of offenses which are being committed. In the words of Mr. Vineet Kumar, he says he expressed his concern over the rise in cases of sextortion during the period of lockdown. He expressed people are getting into relationships online as they are under lockdown, and sextortion cases are being reported to us. The period of lockdown has made women and children more vulnerable to such kind of cyber crimes. Lack of sufficient awareness about online security and complete dependence on online services is making them fall prey to such kind of offenders. Now, at the same time, the cyber criminals too, while being confined, are exploring the cyber world to harass and bully the vulnerable people more and more. Akanksha Srivastav, the founder of Akanksha Foundation, also made similar observations. She stated that the abuse ranged from indecent exposure, unsolicited, obscene pictures, threats, malicious emails claiming their accounts were hacked, ransom demands, blackmail, etc. Men are morphing images and threatening women of circulating such images to all the people who are there in their contact list. And in a way, it's making women more and more vulnerable. It is important to note here that the NALSA chairman, Justice N.V. Ramana, considering all these various kinds of abuses, women abuses, asked the heads of state legal services authority to provide help and assistance to such victims or women victims, victims who have been evicted by their landlords as tenants, etc. And based on a recent dialogue I had, I have come to know that in West Bengal, the State Legal Services Authority is actually under the process, or it is actually considering his directives, and they are in the process of coming up with a program for this purpose. Moving ahead from domestic violence or forms of violence and abuse, we go to the next part, that is access to help and service providers. During this period of lockdown, women are confined within their homes and mostly share the same house with those who abuse. Now, under these conditions, it becomes rather remotely possible for these women to reach out to their near and dear ones or the service providers for assistance. Under Indian conditions, it has also been reported that getting access to mobile phones for communication in privacy has also been a challenge. Now, Jaya Valankar of women's rights organizations said, if a woman has to complain or seek help from a helpline about her family being abusive, she needs to have a landline or a mobile phone while being 100% sure that she is not being overheard, whether it is her marital home or natal home. Now, as documented, almost 57% of women in India do not have access to phones, and their options for registering complaints under the lockdown have become limited. Sometimes women rely on other family members to report on their behalf, but due to this lockdown, they are unable to reach to them. Lack of mobility and independence, both in terms of physical as well as financial, has led to complete control and lack of minimum privacy. Hence, the very technique that was being used to protect women from the virus is making an adverse impact on women and children in violent homes, as the abuser is getting more opportunities to unleash violence. As has been reported in National Family Health Survey 2015-16, less than 1% of the victims of domestic abuse sought help. Together with that, this condition of lack of mobility and access to helplines and internet facilities for women have further greatly limited the scope of registering these cases. But together with this fact, at the same time, we also know that the number of cases which are being reported are high. So had these limitations not been there, had there been ample amount of access, where would these numbers actually be? Or what would these figures actually show us? It's a big question. Along with these, as a consequence, cases relating to divorce, custody, or matrimonial cases are rising. Moving along with that, we come work-home balance. We have many women in the audience, I too being one. We all can witness and we all can feel the excessive pressure that presently we all are going through. This factor has two aspects. First, as all the members of the family are all confined within the household, the quantum of work and quality of expectation from the female member or the homemaker also rises. Especially with domestic helps also abstaining from work due to lockdown, the quantity of work stretches from cleaning to cooking. Though in some households we have witnessed that all members of the family have tried to share the burden of work, but this is not the scenario in many cases. The second aspect is specifically about working women. These women find it really tough to match up to the expectation of the family members during lockdown, and at the same time also cope up with the pressure at work, as most of them work from home. In such cases, for example, children who hardly find mothers at home try to get maximum attention, and at the same time even mothers try to spend and devote maximum of their time quality time with their children. Apart from this, as the lady stays back home, she's expected to perform all her household chores and duties and then manage her professional assignments and commitments. Urvashi Gandhi stated, the load of work during the period of lockdown has increased in houses because everybody is at home. With housekeeping staff being unavailable, the expectation is for women to bear the load and the chances of violence increase if she fails to do it. It reminds me of a video which was very viral on Facebook showing that the husband and the wife, both are young, it's a young couple, and the wife happens to be working from home. She worked the entire night, and the next morning the husband comes to her and says at 7:30 or 8, why didn't you wake up? Who will make the breakfast? The lady states, I've been working the whole night. The man says, so you've been working the whole night, that's your work, but you're at home, so you have to perform this too. My mother performs it throughout the year, but now since you're at home, it is your primary duty to first cater to this. You work the entire night, that is your problem. That is not mine or neither ours. This is just a depiction of the story which is being there, or which is a regular practice in many households today. Health and medical constraints, the next point. Women have been faced with stiff medical challenges during this COVID crisis. Lack of proper medical support and policy for health-related issues concerning women has been a major issue. Lack of proper medical facilities for pregnant women, especially the migrant workers, apart from lack of proper supply of contraceptives, either due to the break of the supply chain as a consequence of lockdown, or due to unavailability of various social workers and paramedical workers supplying the contraceptives in the rural sector, apart from the difficulty in approaching the centers for abortion, are some of the reasons behind the rise in the issues concerning health. As per the national guidelines for infection prevention and control in healthcare facilities issued by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, pregnancy is one of the susceptible factors for the infection. According to the guidelines published by ICMR and National Institute for Research in Public Health for management of pregnant women during COVID, pregnant women do not appear more likely to contract the infection than the general population. However, pregnancy itself alters the body immune system and response to viral infections in general, which can occasionally be related to more severe symptoms, and this will be the same for COVID-19. The coronavirus epidemic increases the risk of perinatal anxiety and depression as well as domestic violence. It is critically important that support for women and families is strengthened as far as possible, and that women are asked about their mental health at every impact. Delhi High Court, in response to a bill filed by SAMA, which is a resource group for women and health, made directions to the center to ensure access of medical services to pregnant women. It stated that these families of pregnant women, or just families where there have been childbirths and they are in the hotspots, should not face any problem in accessing the medical facilities. A bench of Justice Hima Kohli and Subramaniam Prasad, who conducted this hearing through video conferencing, directed the Delhi government to ensure that the helpline number proposed to be set up within 2 days for assisting the senior citizens during the pandemic are also made available to pregnant women. The court ordered that the helpline number should be adequately publicized in newspapers and the social media, and also by involving Delhi police. In the rural sector, a lot of young girls go to the local schools because of the alluring factor of midday meals. Now, with these schools being shut down, these girls from the very poor background are unable to get the benefit or have those midday meals. And as a result, now the families are also not in a very comfortable economic positions, and they may not be in a position to feed all the members of the family equally. Further, being patriarchal in nature, as we all know, the chance of a girl child being fed to satisfy her hunger and the basic nutritional needs are always at the bottom of the priorities. Next, sanitary napkins. It is very surprising that the original list of essential items by the government did not include sanitary napkins. And it is a big concern for women and girls. Now, due to this, the production units were initially shut and supply was a big issue. Further, with the government schools being closed, supply of sanitary napkins to girls, especially in the rural areas and the government schools, was also not available. And as a result, menstrual hygiene of these young girls became a problem. Now, apart from all these, mental health, as we all know, recently there are a lot of discussions and deliberations going on about depression, mental health, how important it is to be happy and content, to be out from the stress that we all undergo. So apart from the physical health, even the mental health of women is equally affected. Continuous abuse, both physical and mental, coupled with extreme stress of domestic and professional commitment, badly affects the mind of a woman, often leading to depression. Men often tend to reinvent themselves during this lockdown by pampering their hobbies and old interests during their free time, but in many cases, women get so exhausted after matching with all the expectations that they lose interest in nurturing their hobbies. And even if they do, they mostly do it to find some solace for themselves and vent out their subdued emotions. Next, women employment and economic security. This challenge too is faced by women at various levels of the society. It is not confined to the lower or the higher strata exclusively. However, the manifestation of the issue varies. Women in the organized as well as the organized sector are affected due to the current crisis. Women engaged as domestic help, the problem that we all are facing, engaged as domestic helps are unable to attend to their work due to the restrictions of lockdown and in order to maintain the preventive measures. As a consequence of this fact, in many cases they have faced pay cuts or loss of jobs. Though we know during the first address by a Prime Minister, he had very clearly stated that no pay cuts or no such steps should be taken which shall negatively impact these poor section of the society. But however, this is a reality. And to an extent, it is natural consequence of the economic crisis that every household belonging to mostly all the economic categories are facing. Nevertheless, the consequential impact is most on these poor households. These women not only look after the family, but in many cases are also the bread earners. This is the fact for not only that such domestic workers, but also for many other women who are also employed in such other types of jobs in the unorganized sector. A very personal example that I may share. Yesterday, I came to know from a friend of mine that the domestic help, those who have been working in their home for the past many years, maybe 20, 25, 30 years, and they do not work currently, are ringing up to say that we do not have money, please give us some assistance. Now these people, they are also a business household, their business is closed at this moment. They are also subject to a restriction. So it is true that that sector, the lower income sector is completely in a bad shape, but that doesn't mean the middle income sector is not in a bad shape. We all are suffering together, we all are sailing together. The lack of political and legal recognition has left domestic workers structurally and procedurally vulnerable to the conditions of poverty and at the mercy of their employers, exposing them to potential harassment, discrimination, exploitation. Adding to the problems of income loss and lack of social security is the prospect of domestic workers having to face harassment and eviction from their rented accommodation. Because they are unable to pay the rent, they are made to leave their homes. Further, they are also being said to be the targeted carriers of the virus. Like many nurses were facing, even these people are facing the same, as has been reported. According to ILO, 81% of Indian women, those who work, are working in the informal economy. The informal sector, which makes up a majority of the Indian economy, is the worst hit by the coronavirus imposed economic slowdown and requires targeted economic policies, government bailouts, and support measures. The economic cost of the lockdown may be disproportionately borne by women at various levels. Another factor, now when the economy will come back to normalcy and various industrial houses or units or companies will be taking up measures to return back on track, and various cost curtail steps will be undertaken. It is anticipated, as per the sociologists and researchers, that it is the women who will be losing their jobs first, or they will be bearing the axe first. As the pandemic worsens India's unemployment problem, women will often be the first to let go when firms start cutting costs, giving the cultural norms, devaluing women's work, and also because women are less likely to work in sectors where telecommunicating is possible. So, based on all this, now if we move towards the conclusion, and I am not a person who believes in negativism. I always try to see the brighter side of the day as well. I don't know, you all must have read a couple of days back about K.K. Shailaja, the Health Minister of Kerala, who was invited by United Nations to deliver as a panelist on World Service Day 2020 to honor her efforts in beautifully designing and engineering the entire combat system of spread of coronavirus in her state. She was in fact consulted by other states of India as well, like Maharashtra. Various female leaders across the globe have excelled in their fights against this deadly virus, starting from New Zealand, Germany, Finland, Denmark, etc. In an article by Giulia Carbonaro, while documenting an observation, she stated, I think what differentiates these women, firstly, is empathy, putting health and human security at the very heart of their response. They have been driven by values. It hasn't been, we've got to save the economy. They have been wise enough to know you can't save an economy if your people are ground down by a pandemic. They have stuck to a plan. They have listened to experts. They have acted on advice using good judgment. They have communicated extremely well. They have engaged the population of the countries in a journey with them. That means they have used just not what the economic figures for their decisions, but they have used their own sentiments, emotions, their inner voice. The self-help groups of women in India, those who have been doing great work in association with the World Bank, have made great, remarkable contribution in the fight against coronavirus. These groups are producing face masks, running community kitchens, delivering essential services, including rendering banking services in various rural sectors through various banking sakhis. Now, in spite of all these challenges that women have been forced to face during this period of lockdown to fight corona, there have been some positive consequences as well. Though there has been rise in cases of domestic violence and cases of potential divorces during this period, but in some cases, this period has also brought close individuals who had drifted far away from each other, being engrossed in the race to excel professionally, or at times when either of the partners, or for that matter, both the partners, did not have time or space to mend the misunderstandings or communication gap. In a relationship, when ego plays the problem, you need to give time, and they never had that time to invest. Lockdown provided a second chance to such relationships to further build or rebuild emotional and physical dependency and close family bonding. However, adoption of certain measures may probably improve the plight that the women have faced during this period. First, apart from the WhatsApp number that has been started by NCW, National Commission for Women, provisions like proper and safe and healthy shelter homes for women is a very important step. These shelter homes will ensure proper, secure places of residence and help them to move out from their homes where they are most close and most vulnerable to their abusers. But as we all know, the condition of shelter homes in India is not very desirable. The policymakers need to put a look on this. The extension of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme to the urban poor would be a very welcome move. We know that recently with the new government policy, The minimum wages has risen from 182 to 240,000 crores has been allocated for this purpose for this National Rural Employment Guarantee schemes under the Act. But if more of such initiatives are also made for the urban sector for women, it would be a great help. Government should make efforts to receive or revive activities like tailoring, food processing, etc., which absorb a good number of female workers. This should be adopted to protect the interest, security, and entrepreneurship of these women. Whatever good work was done has gone many steps behind during this period of lockdown. Now, policies adopted to provide interest-free loans to these small-scale women entrepreneurs will also be encouraging, just not extension of the moratorium. Proper policy should be adopted catering to health and needs of pregnant and lactating mothers. Supply of necessary items like sanitary napkins, contraceptive, and essential services should be made. Online medical consultations, as has been done in various countries globally, in order to ensure them good access to facilities like abortion facilities should be ensured. Efforts must be made to seriously increase activities related to family counseling. In this regard, Sharda University of, I just read yesterday, Sharda University of Greater Noida has made a very welcome move. What they have done is, Greater Noida is the Gautam Budh Nagar. Now they, in collaboration with the police of the Gautam Budh Nagar, have opened a counseling center or family dispute resolution clinic in the Knowledge Park zone of Greater Noida. And their experts or people from the legal fraternity, psychiatry, psychology of the university, along with police personnel, will be undertaking this counseling activity. So such kind of initiatives with more and more participation of the mainstream people and such stakeholders like university, NGOs, etc. is very much welcome, because counseling and victim support services is very important. Finally, government should ensure to adopt a wholesome welfare policy to cater to the needs and challenges of women during the pandemic, involving participation from common man and applying the principle of decentralization. In this regard, I would mention the advisory which is issued by the National Commission for Women regarding the migrant workers, the migrant women workers, is very welcome. If we go through it, it was issued on 7th of April. It is quite an exhaustive guideline, but what requires is proper implementation. At the end, it is very pertinent to remember that it is stated William Shakespeare and Isaac Newton did some of their best work in England when England was ravaged by plague, because none of them had childcare responsibilities. Now, this has been stated, but today we know there are women, those who are doing great work. Pallavi is organizing such a lovely webinar, and various other people around the globe. There have been great works being done, research is being done, but at the same time, it is true that because a woman is like Ma Durga, Dashabhuja, she is expected to do lot more than she's probably originally able to do. But she always wins. She always emerges as the champion. And based on that, she's always made to do beyond her stretched capacities. Though this statement cannot be nullified, but 2020 pandemic has also brought before us examples where women have challenged the challenge before them and have emerged greatly successful. With this, I rest my presentation today. I do not know how far it's been uninteresting or how far it's been dragging, but this was just a small attempt to share with you all whatever I have been gathering over some of the past times during this period of lockdown relating to a woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devdatta ma'am.
Thank you so much, Devdatta ma'am.
We have got a lot of
We
queries
have
from
got a
many
lot of queries
participants.
from many participants.
Most of them have
Most of them
cited here
have
that it's a very nice
cited
presentation.
here
It's
that
a
it's a
very
very nice
informative one,
presentation. It's a very informative one,
and they
Thank you.
have carried a lot
and
from
they
this,
have carried a lot from
and they
this,
have many
and
queries.
they have many
So
queries.
I'm just going to be due to time
So I'm
constraint. I
just
won't be
going to
able,
be
we
due to
won't be
time
able to
constraint.
answer all.
We
So
won't be
we'll be
able to answer
selecting a
all.
few
So we will be selecting a
on
few
first come first basis.
on first come
So the
first
first
basis.
question is from
So the
Beauty
first
Das.
question is from Beauty
Her
Das.
question is,
Her
does
question
domestic
is,
violence has
does
impact
domestic
on child
violence has
development?
impact on child development?
Domestic violence always will have an impact on child development. In a very nutshell, if I say that when a child grows seeing an unhealthy environment or seeing an unhealthy equation between the mother and the father, that always makes an imprint into the mind of the child, and that never goes, and that affects the personality development of the child. That makes the child to be confined to herself. Domestic violence always has a very lasting impact, and it ultimately affects her life when she becomes an adult, whatever. His or her reaction towards their spouses will always be affected. It has a very lasting effect. Domestic violence is never desirable from the standpoint of a growing child. That's why it is said that it's very important to maintain a very healthy relationship for the healthy development of a child. We say that a broken family always has some impact on the growth of a child. A broken family is never desirable.
Thank you, ma'am. Going on
Yes.
to the
Thank you,
next
ma'am.
question is
Going
by
on to the
Uttam
next
Saikya.
question is by
His
Uttam
question
Saikya.
is,
His
if
question
the
is,
parents or
if the
family
parents
members
or
ignored
family
and
members
abused the
ignored
child,
and abused
then
the child, then
where have they
where
to
have
complain
they to
by the child?
complain
Are
by the
there any
child?
process of
Are there
reporting
any
such
process of
cases?
reporting such cases?
Can you come again?
The question is, if the
The question
parents
is,
or
if the
all family
parents or
members
all family
ignored and
members
abused the
ignored and
child,
abused a
then
child,
where
then
have to
where have
where
to
they have to complain or the
or
child have
they
to
have to
complain?
complain or the
Are
child
there
have to
any process of
complain?
reporting
Are there any
such
process of
cases?
reporting such cases?
Of course, such cases happen. Recently, also, we've come to know that during the period of lockdown, I have read, I don't know whether you'll have read or not, there have been cases where the father has been molesting the girl child, and the mother has been helping out in this act. Now, in such cases, of course, the child can complain. There is no restriction on that. She can venture out to any near and dear ones. She can refer the matter to anyone. She can refer to a teacher. She can refer to anyone who can then process it to the rightful authorities. So there's nothing like that, that there's nobody in the family who is not listening. It can be a teacher, it can be an aunt, it can be an uncle, it can be anyone. But there are definitely such cases which are happening. Yes.
Hello.
NGOs play a very big role in this.
Hello. Yeah. Can
Hello?
you hear me,
Yes,
Devdatta?
please
Can you
So
come.
the
hear me?
next
Yeah.
question is
So the
by
next question is
Sauravi
by
Ghosh.
Sauravi
Her
Ghosh.
question is, during
Her question
lockdown,
is,
the
during
day-to-day
lockdown,
court
the
proceedings are
day-to-day court
hampered,
proceedings are
and it
hampered,
includes
and
hardship
it
for
includes
getting
hardship
interim
for
relief to the
getting
victim
interim
woman.
relief to the
So
victim
what is your
woman. So,
opinion or
what is your
suggestion to
opinion or
combat this kind
suggestion
of
to combat
difficulties?
this kind of difficulties?
Yes, now let me tell you, there are a lot of such matrimonial issues which are pending up. Advocate, what was her name? A Mumbai-based advocate, she has put it on record that the huge number of on one hand these cases are rising, and on the other hand these cases are also pending. Now, in once the period of lockdown is lifted and all these matters are being taken up, this entire looking at these matters will also be looked at from a fresh angle, because on one hand you have these issues of maintenance and custody, and considering the economic status and all will again be revisited. So Shurabhi is, I think I know her. She's like my own sister. I know Shurabhi. Now, Shurabhi is very right that yes, the pendency of cases during the lockdown is a big problem. And at the same time, I believe at this point, we are reaching to the courts for redressal of these cases, but at the same time, maybe counseling or institutions like the mediation centers that we have with our high courts can be brought into the picture, as has been advised also by the NALSA chairperson, to provide good amount of counseling facilities, which is part of the victim support services, as I have been again and again re-insisting. That will play a very important role.
Yeah, thank you. The
Thank
next
you.
question
The
is
next question
on
is
shadow
on
pandemic,
shadow
that is
pandemic.
domestic
That is
violence against
domestic
women
violence
all over
against
the
women
world
all over the
increased
world
during the
increased during the
lockdown. What's your
lockdown.
opinion
What's
in
your
this
opinion
regard?
in this regard?
I have been blabbering the entire period on this only.
Yeah, so that's a
Yeah,
question
so
from
that's
one
a
of the
question from one of the
participants.
participants.
Yes, actually this is a global phenomena that we are facing. And see, India is a country which is struggling with its population, poverty, etc. So we all know that. And in such a situation, when an unknown guest in the form of coronavirus suddenly visits us, which and where we are completely unequipped, it is a big challenge. And women are always at the receiving end of such challenges, and we have to fight back. So yes, it is a big problem, and these are the various manifestations that I have just now discussed with you all and shared my views and opinions.
Uh,
Uh,
we are going to take the
we are
last
going to take the
question.
last question.
No more questions
Thank
from
you,
the
Pallavi, for the
participants.
last question.
Yeah, no, because
Yeah,
most of
no,
the
because most of
they will
the
maybe
they will
ask you
maybe
later on.
ask
They
you
will
later
mail
on.
you.
They will mail you.
They have lot of things to
They have
Sure.
lot
discuss.
of
So
things to
one
discuss.
question is from
So
Dr.
one
Lavanya
question
Das.
is from
Her
Dr.
question is:
Lavanya Das.
generally,
Her
women have
question is
faced
generally
more
women have
mental health
faced
issues
more
than men.
mental health issues than men.
Sorry, Pallavi, what did you say after Lavanya Das?
Her
What did you say
question is:
there?
Our
generally,
question is
women
generally
have
women
faced more mental
have
health
faced
issues
more
than
mental health
men.
issues than
If it's true,
men.
then why?
Yes.
If it's true, then why?
Okay. Um, she has used a very important term more. She has made a comparative statement. Before I start, I don't know how many, if any of you access my Facebook account today, you will see I've shared an incident today itself where it's about a couple. They are both engineers working in Sector 5 in Calcutta, if you all know about Calcutta Sector 5. And the woman is beating the man like anything. Like a dog, she's beating the man. And why? Because at the beginning of the lockdown, he had gone and kept his parents at a place called Boitobati in the suburbs of Calcutta. And when we started with the unlocking period, he brought them back. And now, when he has brought them back, the wife is accusing the husband of things like he's a liar and he's not speaking the truth, etc., etc., and is badly molesting, hitting him, and also hitting him with burnt cigarettes, and all that is recorded on video. This is just one example. So I will not say that women are the only one who suffer with such kind of mental health issues. There are men also who badly suffer, and there are cases where women, because of use of some of the laws, these laws had a particular objective, but we all know misuse makes the law completely divert, and as a consequence of that, the court has also come up with various guidelines. There are men who are living a traumatized condition today. But considering all this, we know that if we compare or if we put it in a weighing balance, the side on of the women will be much heavier who bear this emotional stress. And it is because maybe the patriarchal status that we all are used to. We know that generally in 9 out of 10 households, if somebody comes to my house, it's a woman who will go and bring the tea. It's a general custom. And there are certain mind blocks that if it's a child, the child will be more comfortable and secure when he or she is staying with the lady. But today there are cases when fathers are known less than mothers, but nevertheless, the stress that the woman undergoes is because of certain pre-notions that the society has. As I narrated in my deliberation, that when a man is asked to do some simple household chores, along with that, coupled with that, the fact that he's unable to go out, that immense frustration that is growing within himself has to get a vent out. And what is the vent out? Is the mother, the wife, or whoever, at times even the daughters. It is to a large extent the mindset. And apart from that, generally, though I'm not from psychology background, but still I believe women have greater capacity to absorb. And absorption makes them reach a point where it becomes the threshold. That has a big negative impact on their psychological health. And as a result, in the long run, they suffer from issues of mental hygiene more. This subdued or this suppression of mental agony leads to a lot of mental diseases that all comes up from abuse. That abuse may not always be manifested. That is mostly intangible. So all this taken together. Though I'm not a person from psychology, a psychiatrist or psychologist will be a better person to answer this question probably, but that is how I can answer.
Thank you, Debdatta ma'am.
Thank you, Devdatta ma'am.
So
So these are the questions we
you
had, and you have already
answered
answered all the
So
queries.
I
So
think
I
we
think
are
we are
towards the end of the session.
towards the end of the session. Once again, I'd like to thank you so much for the very informative session, and all the participants, they have written here, most of the participants, nice interactions. They have found the interaction very interesting, plus it is a highly informative one, and your presentation is currently being viewed by more than 2000 participants from all
Oh my
over
God.
India. Yeah, it's
Wonderful.
both on YouTube live and on Google Meet. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of
Thank
the
you so much,
organizing
and all the
committee and all the participants. Thank you
And I
so
would
much.
also like to thank Pallavi on behalf of my students, because there are a lot of my students who are viewing this right now. They all have expressed that this is a lovely topic that you have organized. So thank you on behalf of my students as well as on behalf of myself.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
So
So
we
we
will
will
be
be logging off then, and we'll definitely keep in contact for any more sessions in the future. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Thank you so much.
এতিয়া এটা ধামাকা প্ৰব্লেম, এক ছেকেণ্ড ৰ, আধা ঘণ্টা প্ৰব্লেম আছে এইটো। মোৰ মানে মৰিবলৈ গমেই পালি ন, স্ক্ৰীণখন আহি গ'ল। এতিয়া আকৌ অফ কৰি অন কৰিব, এইখন ষ্ট্ৰীমটো নাযায় জানে।